Today is the 6th of May, and I'm going to interview this afternoon Carol Toussaint, a prominent Madison community activist in Middleton. Now we'll hear from Mrs. Toussaint, and she will start by telling us something about her own background, where she came from, and what she...
Well, like a lot of individuals in this city, I came here first to go to university. As an 18-year-old from the northwestern part of the state, from rural Rusk County.
Must have been exciting.
Well, it was pretty different, very different. My only times in Madison prior to coming here as a university student had been when I had come to participate in high school forensic contests and music contests, since Madison was the mecca for high school students who had achieved that level in competitions. And it was a very different place, and I was the only person from my high school coming that particular year. I did know people who were here a year or two.
Did your parents go to school here? Were they,
No.
they had not had some experience?
No, my parents had no association with the university at all, and in fact, my mother, who had grown up in Iowa, kept mentioning every small liberal arts college in Iowa to me as the topic of college came up, and I systematically rejected them one by one. I did not see my future as being connected in any way with a Grinnell or a Simpson or a Buena Vista College. All of these were places, not my
College
mother.
of Chiropractic.
Oh, yeah, that never entered my mind either. And I have thought about this recently, because if there had been the reciprocity between Minnesota and Wisconsin at the time that I graduated from high school, I would have been far more apt to have gone to the University of Minnesota, because that whole northwestern quadrant of Wisconsin is oriented to that which was on in Minnesota.
The Twin Cities.
That's right. And I think we were one of a handful of families in our little village who took the Milwaukee Journal. Everyone else, as did we also, took the Minneapolis Star, Tribune,
This
the
reminds me
St.
of
Paul
me.
Press.
I
Yes.
grew up in a place where we read the Milwaukee Journal, and all my friends had the Chicago Tribune.
Oh, all right.
And that created a great embarrassment, I think.
Well, it was a long time before I found out that the Milwaukee Journal was an afternoon paper. Because, of course, if you live in upstate Wisconsin, you get the Milwaukee Journal the next morning. So, but I thought about that. Wanting the university education, I probably would have chosen to go to Minnesota, except that as a Wisconsin resident, I chose to come to Madison. So that's how I started out. And I think I was really lucky, because even as a university student, I came to know this community. Many university students don't. Why is because I became an active participant at First Congregational Church. It's, as you know, possible to come here for 4 years and leave without ever getting to know anything about the community. And through my association with other university students through the church, I came to know a good many Madison, mostly Madison West.
Can I stop
graduates.
this for just a second and check this?
I actually believe that makes quite a difference when you're a student at the university, if you have any interaction with the community. The other unusual thing about my experience as a university student that tied me so to the community is that the people I met through journalism school seemed also to be people who were well connected to the university. I had the great good fortune of getting to know many of the professors on a personal level which of course we can claim was because of the size of the university at that time.
What year are we talking about?
I was here from 47 to 51, 1951 graduate of the university. And, you know, it was just such second nature to come to know something about the community. So I appreciated that. I did leave here. I took a job with the Meredith Publishing Company in Des Moines. And
You got to Iowa anyway.
got to Iowa. My mother was happy, you're right. But I was not particularly happy. And Des Moines as a city, after Madison as a city, did not appeal to me, although I had a wonderful job working both with Better Homes and Gardens and Successful Farming magazines. One of those, I think, rare situations where the editor, particularly of Successful Farming magazine, was a man who had good instincts and trusted his instincts. And he didn't care if you were 22, if he thought you were a good writer or you could handle something. He gave you the freedom to do things.
Mm-hmm.
So I really had an outstanding opportunity to work, traveled a good bit for them, but continued to have this interest in the things I had done through the church, and ended up coming back to Madison to take a job at the Presbyterian Student Center on campus, and getting back into work with the Wisconsin Council of Churches, doing public relations work for them, and very good opportunities. Again, I think people taking someone young and not that experienced and trusting that they could handle a job. So
I never found anybody that would,
you didn't find people
that
like
would
that?
trust me.
Oh, that surprises me.
Right.
But I may have just been lucky in
Mhm.
that. When the word mentor became so popular, years later I realized I'd had some wonderful mentors, even if I hadn't known what to call them.
Mhm.
And the mentors were all people who were giving of themselves to the community. So that's really the role model. Another word we didn't use
Yeah.
when I was that young, but that was the role model that I had.
Mhm.
So
Well, you came along at a good time, too.
that's true, Ruth. That's exactly right.
There were jobs available. and
There
they
were
looking.
jobs, and there were opportunities to prove yourself, not only in your job, but as I continue to think, many opportunities to show your competencies through things that you do as a volunteer.
Mhm.
That's been kind of critical in my own personal
Yes.
development.
You have a broad background of volunteerism.
Well, I've always looked at volunteerism as a real two-way street, because I always got a lot out of what I was doing. And one of the things that I received was an opportunity to continue to practice my own skills.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, this meant staying abreast of what was happening in some of the communications, keeping in personal contact with people at the newspapers, radio stations, television stations, and having really a professional contact, even though I was functioning as volunteer.
Mm-hmm.
That's
Where did the doctor come in on?
Oh, where did the doctor come in? Well, I met my husband when he was in his neurology residency. He had come back to Madison after medical school was here, and then he did his internship away, and then came back here for his residency. So he was in his residency when I met him, when I came back here to do the work at the Presbyterian Student
Mhm.
Center. We left Madison within about 2 years of when we were married, and were away only 2 years, and then got a wonderful opportunity to
So
come
you've been
back.
here. So you've had many, many years uninterrupted.
Really have uninterrupted.
It's wonderful.
I've now lived here since 1958.
I remember looking back on my own experience, how many people came to Madison at about the time we did, at the end of the war,
Mhm.
and stayed.
Right.
so that I find myself with many old friends in here. People have not moved away.
Yes.
They're here, and they're many of them congenial and thoughtful friends.
I do think it's important, though, to have the experience of living somewhere else.
Mm-hmm.
It helps you look at what we have here, and for me, it has helped me value that which we have. I mentioned living and working in Des Moines. The political climate in Iowa just didn't appeal to me at all, because I was familiar with the kind of rich exchange of political idea and discourse that marks this state. So coming back to Madison and seeing that again, I think helped me value it more.
Yes, sure. I think that's what the war did for a lot of us that are a little slightly older. Went away for a few years and thought all the time we were gone about coming back.
Well, Madison as a community has just about every opportunity you might be looking for. And in my own view, you can do almost anything that you want, either by way of service through volunteer organizations, or as I truly believe, also doing things that allow you to receive as a volunteer. I spend a lot of my time now talking with young women who are kind of looking for how to make their way in the community, and most of them know what to do professionally. They are looking for some ideas of things to do on a personal level. And I like to recommend the volunteer activities, not only because you often find your friends through some of the things that you do in that way, but because of the extraordinary opportunity to test yourself.
Yeah, to make
try something new.
Contributions.
That's right. But not necessarily just contribute if you're an accountant, always be the treasurer, you know. If you really want to get into more research or public speaking, volunteer organizations will give you the freedom to try some things that you never get to try in your paid professional careers.
I think that we're going to need more people too. There's a climate change going on in Madison that requires that good volunteers and smart, thoughtful people have to really make some contributions now, because we can see the handwriting on the wall.
There's a need for a lot of leadership on particularly human service issues. We've had our resources shrink a great deal, yes.
And we have these controversies about Santa Claus and Christmas and so on that assume such major proportions.
That's true.
And we've got to be available to help out.
Well, there must have been a time when the leadership in this community believed that we did have a set of values which were shared by most of us. And that probably was true. But as the community became more diverse, I'm not sure that with the leadership within certain of our institutions kept up with that change in diversity.
I agree.
And some of the values came in conflict at that point. I think it requires some thoughtful discussion to make sure that we are always moving toward the future in a way that is good for all of our citizens, not just for a small few that might be in the advantaged positions.
People move in and out of things that are
deal.
going on, and it's quite disturbing.
Well, we see a lot in our schools, which I know has been one of your major interests. And I'm very proud of some of what has been accomplished in our schools. My two sons are both graduates of East High School, and it's been very good to see that East has gotten some recognition. They've had some exceptional leadership. I think Mr. McPike was just very good for that school.
Just a very fortunate.
Good person at the right time. Good timing. But there was a time when the resources of the community were not as evenly spread around the community, and probably during the time, maybe even when you were on the school board, and decisions were made to set up the areas and to try to be more certain that the resources went equitably into each of the areas.
Yes, you had to be very, very conscious of that in local politics.
Yes, you did.
Do something for the east side, you better do something for the west side, and vice versa.
That's right.
But so that we had an even progression. We don't have a whole section of the city that many larger cities have that's been neglected and is creating such havoc now.
I spoke last week with Dan Bernstein, the new dean of the law school, who said that when he came, probably when he was looking over the job, and people drove him around the city, and they took him through some of the areas which are our assisted housing areas. And he said, I looked at them and said, you mean these are the projects? And he was told, well, yes, you could use that terminology. He said he kept waiting to see what parts of the city were really slums. And they weren't here.
No,
and that gave him great hope that this community still has an ability to manage the issues and problems.
Yeah, he's a very alert and interested person.
He certainly is.
He spent a lot of time in Madison before he ever was considered for the job he has.
I see. I guess I wasn't.
He was a graduate student in the law school, and he taught a number of semesters. He'd come for one semester at a time.
Oh.
So he was well acquainted with the staff. In fact, it was a lucky choice.
Well, he said that he's well acquainted with a lot of the large cities across the country, and that as he looks at Madison, he still thinks this is a city that can be governed and that can address in a constructive way any of the issues it confronts. You'll be interested to know that he is now a member of the Board of Governors of the Community Foundation.
That's good.
He has been appointed by Chancellor Shalala, who did serve herself on the Board of Governors for the first 3 years she was here, and saw how important it was to have that connection to the community.
Let's talk about the Community
All right,
Foundation.
let's do that.
It's one of the most remarkable stories.
Well, you are a part of that story because you're the person who interested me in coming to do some work. That was 1980. And I don't exactly know how long you've been on the board.
I've been on for many years. We sort of stumbling along without much direction.
Well, I couldn't be more proud of the association with the Community Foundation. I do believe that it is an institution that is properly positioned to serve this entire community. And of course, the exciting things that have been happening now.
It's just really wonderful.
It is wonderful.
When I was on, it had gone through this 25 years or so, and there was a real question about whether it was even legal, because they had just taken the money that was left over from the fund drives and set up this foundation. It had about 4 or 5 men that were involved in it, and that was all. And they were beginning to expand a little bit when they asked me to be on the board, and I stayed quite a long time. But
well, you did. You were in that transition when, in 1977, they got approved to be a community foundation in the fullest sense of the description given by the IRS, so that it is a charitable operation with no questions about its ability to receive the tax-deductible contributions. But as you learned, and at the point at which I came in 1980, the issue was, are we working hard enough and showing support from our community so that we merit that.
Yes, we never really raised
foundation.
any money.
That's right. That
We
was my
spent
first job.
We spent our income,
Mhm.
I remember.
Right.
And that was about $50,000 a year at the most.
That's right, because there was a $500,000 fund in 1980 when I first began doing some of the consulting work. And in the next 4 years, we didn't do much about raising money. We raised small amounts of money, enough that we met our public support test so that the IRS didn't raise questions about our status. But the thing we really worked at was clarifying our relationship to United Way, because many people thought we were just an arm of the United Way,
Yes.
sort of like a United Way foundation. And of course we were not. We were chartered, a trust form, chartered to serve the entire community, whether the organizations that we would grant monies to had anything to do or nothing to do with United Way. And the turning point came in the fall of 1983 when the United Way Board and the Community Foundation Board reached a memorandum of agreement. And
That was a major accomplishment.
was a major...
'Cause we distrusted each other.
That's right. There was a high degree of distrust. And it was hard to understand because most of the people on the Board of Governors of the Foundation had at one time or another been active leaders in the United Way. But we signed that memorandum of agreement, and the United Way put $500,000 into a designated fund within the Community Foundation. And that did two important things. One was it doubled the assets of
Yes.
the Community Foundation, but more importantly, it was a signal that said the United Way is not going to set up its own foundation. It is going to use the Community Foundation for its endowment funds. Very important step. And it's a decision that needs to be worked
Were
at.
you on the staff when that happened?
I was, yes,
You were the executive?
I represented the Community
You
Foundation
succeeded a
as
man
staff.
that I helped to hire. That was the biggest flop that ever come along. It was so nice that you were available when...
Well, you remember that the man whom you hired came into this community, and I think he had the requisite skills as a community foundation executive, but he didn't know this community.
No, he didn't.
And when he left after only 14 months, he was only here 14 months, he left, I think, because he saw that was a big stumbling block for him. And he also had the opportunity to go to a very good job back in his education field.
Yeah.
Right. But if you'll recall, the Milwaukee Foundation executive, David Huntington, an experienced foundation director working with a highly successful foundation, came over and consulted with you, and he said, you should find someone who knows the community and is known in the community. That person can learn what they need to know about the foundation business. And that's how you came to ask me to work with you. And I think it was a good choice. And the proof of that is probably not in what I did, but in what has been done in the last 5 years.
And launching the whole...
With Jane Coleman as the executive director, this foundation just took off. It was $1 million in assets in 1986. 1986.
Which is twice as much as it had been.
Right. That doubling happened with while I was still working with the foundation. Jane has taken it from 1 million to 5 million to 7 million, and then suddenly we received this word that a resident who hadn't been in our area for 20 years, Marie Graver, she had retired to Florida 20 years ago when the Graver Company was sold, that because we had a vehicle for her to give back to her community, was giving, we learned at first, at least $10 million. So then that was going to mean we went from 7 million to 17 million overnight. But when the actual word came from the estate, it isn't 10 million, it is closer to 17 million. So now our assets in 5 years have gone from 1 million to close to 22 million.
Are you still on that board?
Now I am on the board.
Mm-hmm.
I did this half-time work for 4 years, from 80 to 84.
Mm-hmm.
Then I stepped back from it, and when Jane Coleman came in as the executive director, she said, you know, I really want you back on this board because you represent a lot of knowledge, the tribal memory, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
And I told Jane I'd always be available to her, but I really wondered if she wanted me on the board, because sometimes you feel you need board memberships to get someone who's
expand.
not committed and to
Yeah.
expand. That's right. So Jane and others, Bob Cook and some of the other people on the board, it really asked me to become a voluntary participant, to be a board member.
Mm-hmm.
So I've done that, and I'm the mayor's appointment to the board.
That's wonderful.
Interesting arrangement that we have of reaching out into the community and getting the appointing authorities to help bring the diversity that's needed on that board.
Who are the appointing authorities besides the mayor? You have
The mayor and the county exec, then the chancellor and the director of MATC.
Mm-hmm.
Those are 4. Each appoint 1. Then the United Way appoints 3. The Chamber of Commerce appoints 2. The Labor Council appoints 2. And the League of Women Voters appoints 1. I've always felt that when they wrote this trust document back in the mid-70s, that they must have put the League of Women Voters in there so that there'd be at least one woman, Ruth.
Yes.
I think they thought that's how they'd get one woman on the board.
one objective woman who would spend some time at it.
Right, who would be willing, who would know how to do it.
And one of the
right.
greatest services that the League has performed, I think, is providing personnel
It is.
for all kinds of
You're
different
right. You're right.
community activities.
Well, those 12 appoint 3 at large.
Mhm.
So. Can we talk about the League of Women Voters for
Yes.
a minute? Because that organization gave me most of the opportunities that I've had.
Mm-hmm. I think that's true for many
It's
people.
Of many, many people. I can't say enough about the League as a training ground for whatever it is
I never
that you want to
could
do.
be very active in the League because I was in politics from the time I
That's
started
right.
out.
And you have to make that choice.
But I could benefit from the things they were doing, which
Yes,
I always did.
and I'm sure that you saw that from time to time, persons such as yourself involved in the partisan end of politics still relied on the League a lot for some of the local community issues,
And you could
which
trust
have
them.
no partisan interests.
Yes, and you could trust them. The
I
things
bel-
that they did were available and useful.
Good point. They tended to be on practical topics, things that we really needed to know about because they were action that we could or should be taking, and also that the information was always readily available. The League has never had enough money to do the things it really needed or wanted to do. But one of the things it's always done is put its financial resources behind getting materials duplicated and distributed, so that though a study might be done for those of us who are members and we're trying to make some decisions, let's say, about a school issue, we still put whatever limited resources we had behind making sure that people who never planned to have anything to do with the organization still had access to the information.
I think that's been especially true in Madison. Probably where the League operates everywhere.
It's
not
fun.
quite the same.
Yeah, it's fun to compare. And of course, as I became first I did the radio program, the state radio program for the League for 2 years, and went on the state radio network once a week as the moderator of a program, 15-minute program, where we used interviews, various kinds of of formats, forums. We'd have debates. Whatever it took to get the information out. And my job was to first plan the programs, who would be on, what the topics would be, and then to be the moderator. So when I did that, I kind of got connected to this statewide constituency that's out there. Then I did the legislative coordination. Then I became the Wisconsin League president. And in that position, I traveled all over the state and got to know the communities really well.
Mm-hmm.
There were about 40 communities in Wisconsin at that time that had local league organizations. And then I went on the national board as a national vice president. And again, the timing was wonderful because I was there during the time that the league decided to do the first presidential debates.
Mm-hmm.
So I served on the steering committee organizing the presidential forums that in that spring of 1976.
You didn't make Mr. Nixon shave before he...
That was not the series that I was involved with. The year that I was working on it, we had Jimmy Who and Milton Schaap, who was then the governor of Pennsylvania, was aspiring to the Democratic nomination.
I have an interview with Mrs. Toussaint.
Well, I was just mentioning about my work with the Utility Women's Conference, and this is an opportunity for me to get to know women around the country. I find...
Now, these are women that are interested in utilities?
No, these are women who have been elected, as I have been, to the board of an investor-owned utility.
Mm-hmm.
We also have expanded to include women who are at the policy level as employees, like a corporate secretary or vice presidents. And we see as our role, really, education for ourselves so that we are more knowledgeable about the issues.
Yeah, so you don't look foolish.
So we don't look foolish. You've got it. And our very first reasons for coming together, the Financial Women's Association of New York had a number of women who were either in Standard, and one woman was a vice president of Standard & Poor's, another one was a vice president at Merrill Lynch, and they were encountering around the country public utilities adding women to their boards. This was happening in the early 70s. And they were intrigued that most of us did not come because of what we knew about finance.
Mm-hmm.
Most of us came on those boards because of what we knew about the communities.
They had to have a woman.
They felt the need for a woman. That's
Mm-hmm.
absolutely right. And the preponderance of them came from academic backgrounds. They were home economics deans, consumer science, and its relationship to public utilities is pretty obvious. Women who were economists. A woman from Montana Power was the chairman of the Department of Economics at the University of Montana, for example. But this Financial Women's Association in New York said, you know, I bet if we organize a seminar on utility finance, that maybe these women would come. And so in 1978, they organized such a seminar, and they identified 85 women around the country and invited us to the seminar, and I think about 55 of us showed up, which says something about the need.
Yeah,
it
sure
was
does.
there. And they sponsored us for several years. In 1980, I was the program co-chair and got the Wisconsin utilities to put some dollars into this meeting, and we had a session in Zion, Illinois, still with this Financial Women's Association of New York sponsoring it. But those of us from the Midwest said, wait a minute, you know, we could get out here in the middle of the country, and then maybe the women from the West Coast wouldn't have, why should we all have to go to New York, is what we were saying. And they agreed, and that was a quite an interesting conference, and one of my jobs as the program co-chair had been to help select the speakers. And now this is the spring of 1980, and we decided we'd like Jeanne Kirkpatrick, who was at the American Enterprise Institute, as a speaker, because she was teaching at Georgetown and teaching on topics of public policy formation. So I got to make this contact with Jeanne Kirkpatrick and went to see her at her office at American Enterprise Institute, and yes, indeed, I mean, she'd be very interested in doing this, and we got on her calendar. And by July of 1980, every day I'd read the paper, and there was speculation that if Ronald Reagan got elected president, what would Jeanne Kirkpatrick be appointed to? I could see my program, which was scheduled for the Saturday after the November election. I could just see my program star going down the drain. So I kept trying to keep in touch with her office and with her, and I was given assurances that...
Was she at the United Nations then?
No, see, this was before.
Oh, yeah,
and some people thought she might be appointed Secretary of State if Ronald Reagan got elected. And so one day I thought, I just have to have some more confidence that Jeanne Kirkpatrick is going to show up 5 days after the election, especially if Reagan wins. And so what did I do? I used my Wisconsin connections. I put in a call to Austin Ranney, who was her colleague at the American Enterprise Institute, who had been my political science professor here at UW-Madison. When I got Austin on the phone, I explained all of this to him, and I said, can you tell me, is Jeanne Kirkpatrick the kind of person who's going to honor that commitment? Is she going to pull out on me at the last minute? And Austin, of course, said, well, first of all, I'll go and talk to her and tell her she can't do that to a friend of mine. But he said, I think I can also get kind of an inside inkling for you. So he went to bat for me, and he called me back, and he said, no, he said, I have to tell you, I think the chances are very good Jeanne Kirkpatrick will get a Reagan appointment. But he said, she said, you tell her not to worry, I will be there. And she was. But I truly enjoy this group. And
they just have an occasional meeting?
Once a year.
Once a year.
And our whole
Do you have a newsletter?
Nothing. We aren't even a membership organization. We have no bylaws, no nothing. We get a different company to sponsor the conference each year, and then the 6 of us who are on the board determine the topic and plan the agenda. And I am the chairman of the board, but another woman is the program chairman. So at the upcoming conference in September, which will be in Atlantic City, we have just an outstanding program, and I have had very little responsibility for that. Last fall, we were in Honolulu, and Hawaii Electric was our host, and then we had an excellent program, really focusing in on all of the economic issues involved in the Pacific Rim. And then we did a field trip to look at the alternative energy sources, the ocean thermal conversion techniques, and the geothermal. It's just...
You have to go to Kuwait and turn the lights on everywhere.
Maybe we'll have to do that.
I guess they're still out.
But you wanted me to talk more about the community.
Oh, I just want to know, so you've been on everything that you've been in, you've been an officer or a responsible party. I have
had that opportunity, and I would say I've focused a good bit on economic opportunity issues and, of course, the judicial issues. And I worked, helped organize the Citizens Conference, and then worked on all the judicial reorganization, as I mentioned, the trial courts and creating the appellate courts. And then when Tony Earl was elected governor, a couple of us went to him and said, we wish you'd really give a serious look at how judicial appointments are made. And he was very open to this, and we presented to him a plan by which he would name an advisory committee. And I remember very well sitting there with him and asking him to consider this, and he looked at me and he said, well, if I agree to do this, will you do something for me? That I would try. And he said, well, if you really think this will work, then you better be willing to chair it.
Mm-hmm.
So he gave me the opportunity for that 4 years that he was governor to chair the advisory council. And in that period of time, there were 32 judicial vacancies, none at the Supreme Court, but there were appeals court and the rest, 2 or 3 appeals court, 3 appeals court vacancies, and the rest were at the trial court level. And that was an outstanding opportunity, again, to work with people all over the state. And Tony Earl put together a good committee. There were 5 of us who served for that full 4 years, and then as we had a vacancy in each district, we would draw a lawyer and a non-lawyer from that district to serve on the advisory committee.
Does that still function?
No, it is not. It was created by executive order, and that executive order died with the change of administrations. And Governor Thompson does have an advisory group. He uses attorneys. The thing that was an unusual characteristic of the group that Governor Earl put together was that he agreed that the non-lawyers should outnumber the lawyers on the committee. So of the 5 of us, 3 of us were not lawyers. And then from each local district, we added 1 lawyer and 1 non-lawyer.
How many vacancies did you say?
32.
In a 4-year period?
In 4 years. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Most of them came right at the beginning because there's always a bit of that as judges maybe wait for the next governor if they favor the politics of the next governor to name their replacement. But also at the time that we started, there was a 70-year mandatory retirement age for state judges, and the legislature lifted that during the time that we were doing the appointments. So we had only 2 or 3 that were vacancies created by the incumbent judge reaching that mandatory retirement age. So judicial had been an interest of mine. The arts, I came to serve with some arts groups because I had done also with Governor Earl, I worked full-time as the assistant director of the Strategic Development Commission, which Governor Earl had put together in 84, 85. And one of the recommendations that never got acted on in that year and a half was researching what was the economic impact of the arts on the state of Wisconsin. So from in 86, 87, I did a project sponsored by the Wisconsin Academy of Sciences, Arts, and Letters, and we put together a research project and surveyed, did a lot of things to gather data, and wrote a report to document that the nonprofit arts are an important part of the economy of the state of Wisconsin. So I've done things in the arts, but that was also looking at...
I notice you're on the board of the Historical Society.
I'm not on the Historical Society, but I'm on the History Foundation. I've done some things with the Historical Society, and that is an interest of mine. I was on the board of visitors of the School of Business, which is sort of surprising, except that they were interested in me because they wanted people who were not graduates of the business school but who related to the business community in Wisconsin, and I enjoyed doing that. I think I was there for 5 or 6 years, 5 anyway.
You've been very active in your church.
I have been very active in First Congregational Church. Again, they gave me the opportunity to be the first woman to serve as the lay moderator of the church, which was in 1972. And I served on the foundation for the church. I chaired the fundraising committee when we did our big capital improvements in 79, 80. Usually, Ruth, you find me where there is money to be raised, because I'm very comfortable doing that. The other place, and for instance, the reason I came to the Historical Society participation is that I really care about governance. And if there's a committee that's going to review the structure and organization of anything, I'm ready to do that.
That's wonderful. And that, really, the wonderful part about that is that that needs to go on in every organization.
And
not find somebody with the background and the experience and the interest.
Not everyone likes to do it, do they?
No. These are short-term responsibilities, relatively short-term.
That's right. So, I think that's a pretty good cross-section of what I've
your
done.
husband is retiring?
My husband has retired, or is in the process of retiring, having been the only medical director that Central Wisconsin Center for the Developmentally Disabled has ever had. He started that operation working with the superintendent in 1958. That's what brought us back to Madison. We were building that facility for the mentally retarded. And he is putting all of that behind him and has a lot more flexibility in his life. He is doing some neurological consultation work, so he's
Does this alter
busy.
your plans? Are you tending to
No,
stuff off a little bit?
No, I don't think so at all. And he, of course, isn't either, because in addition to his consulting work that he has just taken on, he has been since 1980, 79 or 80, been the the commander of the medical unit of the Wisconsin Air National Guard. So when people say, I hear your husband's retiring, I say yes, from one of his 3 jobs. So John is still very active with his profession as a neurologist, and his community interests are music, and he sings in the church choir and in the civic choir, chorus at times, symphony chorus they call it now. Once in a while he sneaks over to Middleton, because the Middleton civic chorus has a wonderful reputation, and he particularly likes their conductor, and if they're doing the Brahms Requiem or something that he really enjoys singing, then he leaves the Madison Civic Chorus and goes over there. Actually, after all of his years of singing in First Congregational Church Choir, in June he's about to leave with the Bethel Lutheran Chamber Choir to go to Germany for 2 weeks to sing, and that's not because he's changing denominations, but because they needed a tenor. One who had his passport in order and was ready to go.
Well, that points out another of the great advantages of Madison. If you're interested in music, you have infinite numbers of opportunities.
Yes, you do. You do.
And you can keep yourself as busy or as free as you like.
And you can be a participant or a spectator.
15,000 people to listen in this Capitol Square on a summer evening.
Yes. Yes, we've been, I'm more than John, but both of us have been involved in helping the chamber orchestra get started with those concerts on the square, and our younger son Todd was the coordinator one summer between his university studies, or maybe that was the first year after he finished graduate school and was looking for a job. I guess that's the year that it was. And I think just the whole idea that all of these people are coming into this, into the heart of the city, I really like that. I am on the board of Downtown Madison. I've worked in the last several years trying to get us a convention center, because I really do believe in that. I chaired the group we called the Coalition for Madison's Future, and we were primarily the fundraising, political action group that tried to get the voters to agree with us. But I'm quite hopeful that Mayor Soglin has a good group going now, and if the city should decide to try to build the Frank Lloyd Wright, I'm sure I'll be involved. I worked also in getting the funds raised for the Civic Center, and have served on that foundation, which is a small grant-giving foundation. I like associations with money, and I'm not really sure about this. There are no bankers in my background whatsoever, but
well, anybody that's interested in money can find any opportunity to volunteer your services.
you certainly can. And I think
I've spent my life sort of dancing out of the way,
I see.
getting busy with something else so that I can't go and raise the money.
Well, I think that the richest part about living in Madison is not just the opportunities that are here, but the people that come with the opportunities. And I'm really, really grateful for all of the chances that I've had to make a difference in living here.
Oh, well, that's very nice.